And the pasuk says, Dafka, his sons carried him as he instructed them. So Rashi says his sons and not his grandchildren. Because Yankov instructed, I don't want any Mitzrayim carrying my body.
I don't want Mitzrayim.
And none of your children, he tells his children. Because Rashi here is going with the opinion of Rabbi Nechemiah that the Shvatim married women from Canaan. So I don't want my Einiklach, who are children of Canaanites, to carry. Only you. So not Einiklach, only children. But then Yankov says, Levi shouldn't carry me, because in the future his family will carry the Aron. Yosef shouldn't carry me, because he's a Melech. So Menashe and Ephraim will carry instead of them. Which means that Yaakov was in fact carried by some of his Einiklach. So in the beginning Rashi says, only you, not the Einiklach. But in the end, he had a few Einiklach. Now, it's not mamish a contradiction, because Rashi has nothing against his Einiklach. He just said that most of them are children of women who are Canaanites. That won't apply to Yosef's kids. Yosef was married to Osnas. Now, Rashi never quotes the Medrash that Osnas was the daughter of Dinah and Shechem.
And it also conflicts with
But she was Mitzrayim. She wasn't. She was not Canaanites.
But it conflicts with the parish where it says.
Right, but for the Pharaoh, Koyanoin, two sheets. And each one, that's Dosan is two. They're all sets already. They're all sets. They're pre-made sets.
After the story of Shechem, Shimon married Dinah.
Yeah, but so that's Shimon's kid.
This was.
So Shaul ben Aknan is
Asnas
Dinah's kid.
would have been from Shechem. This would have been from Shimon.
Right. So that's how he would have answered.
What's this?
Because Shaul ben Aknan is
Right.
if you hold it, that's from
Shaul
Shem.
married Dinah.
Then it can't be Osnas. Can't be from Shem.
Not Shechem.
No, Osnas was Dinah's kid from Shechem, but then Dinah married Shimon and they had their own
And
kids.
that's the Shaul Aknan.
Exactly. Fine. Okay, so the shaila we're going to discuss is, are grandchildren actually considered children? And to what degree? And specifically when it comes to the mitzvah of honoring. It's a set already of 2 pages. So it's a fascinating discussion. And we begin with number 1. The Maharik, Rabbi Yosef Kolon, was from the greatest poskim of the 1400s. He was born in France, roughly the year 1420, and he passes away in about the year 1480. Lived about 60 years in Italy, spent most of his life in Italy. He was the Rebbe of the Bartanura, Rabbeinu Evadia Bartanura, the commentary on Mishnayos. He was a great student of the Maharik, Rabbi Yosef Kolon. The Maharik actually is often confused with Rabbi Yosef Kaira because it's the same Rosh Tevis. Mem Hey Reish Yud Kuf can either stand for Moreinu or Rav Rabbi Yosef Kaira or Rabbi Yosef Kolon. It can also stand for Yisroel Dikuriel, who was a student of the Arizal. There's numerous people, and but it's interesting. There's actually one of the big debates between the Maharik and Rabbi Yosef Kaira. Rabbi Weber, you'll like this, is that the Shaila once came up. It was Shabbos Bereshis, I think it was the first Shabbos, and they wanted, or maybe it was some Chestayr, they needed to give out aliyahs, and there was a kohen in the shul, so they threw the kohen out of the shul in order they can give the aliyah to somebody else. It happened in the shul. The Ma'arik gave a thumbs up. The Ma'arik says it's good. Rabbi Yosef Kaira was displeased.
Battle lines are drawn.
So it's been a battle ever since. Rabbi Yosef Kaira was born about 8 years after the Ma'arik passed away. So, for us, they're more or less the same time, but they were not exactly contemporaries. But nonetheless, the Ma'arik gave the thumbs up about throwing the kohen out of shul. Rabbi Yosef Kaira said, no, you can't do that. Anyhow, so Rabbi Yosef Kolon, the Ma'arik, is dealing with the following shaila. Back in the day, not everyone said Kaddish. One person said Kaddish. Not everybody in shul said Kaddish. And there was often a debate who should get the rights for the Kaddish. And the shaila is, does an Einakul who's saying Kaddish for his Zaydah have any halachic rights that I deserve to be the one to say Kaddish because of my Zaydah? Well, let's say for us, let's say you're fighting over the Amud. It should never have to be such a fight, but if there is, then, if someone wants to say Kaddish or daven for the Zaydah, does he have any halachic rights to the Amud? And the Ma'arik says no. The Ma'arik is going to paskin. The whole idea of saying Kaddish is under the umbrella of the mitzvah of honoring your parents, and there is no mitzvah to honor your Zayda or your Baba, says the Maharik. This is his opinion. Let's read number 1. Shahari loy matzina, we don't find b'shum makom anywhere sheyis chayiv, that a person's obligated, ella only bekibud ha'av, honoring your father, v'a'im, that we find in Chumash here. Would you like papers? Only your father, your mother. Ve'eshes aviv b'chayav, and if someone's father remarries while the father is alive, you have to honor your stepmother. And so to Baal imay b'chayav, if someone's mother remarries, has another husband, so you have to honor your stepfather while the mother's alive. Va'achiv hagodol, your older brother, and that's it. Umuchach luhu mikroi, and they're all learned out from Sukkim, kedarminon, like we learn b'ksuvas in Perek Hanoisa. It's limited to 5 people: your father, your mother, stepfather, stepmother, and older brother. That is it. Or he says the other extension is
Older brother, oldest brother.
according to most, it's oldest brother. There are those who tie an older brother, but most hold it's oldest brother. And when it comes to sister as well, there's a big debate between the Shavus Yankov and the Chidah. The Shavus Yaakov holds Rabbi Yaakov Reisher, one of the big poskim, in the generation before the Baal Shem. Baal Shem Tov's times, but he's a little bit older. He times it's only the oldest brother, not the oldest sister. But the Chidah in his Birkei Yosef disagrees and says the oldest sister as well. The oldest sister.
Oldest or older?
No, the Stam and oldest. There's Bechlal Machlekes if it's oldest brother or also oldest sister. There's another Machlekes even if it's brother, is it every older brother? To say any older sister, that's too much of a suffix. That's like a sfek sveka. That you wouldn't have to be, definitely wouldn't have to be machmir for that. The best thing is, or the next thing you could extend it to is, Eishes Aviv, your stepmother, Afilu la'achar Mrs. Aviv, even after the father passes, the mitzvah ba'alma as stam a mitzvah k'de'isa, also like the Gemara says in Ksuvas. What's he talking about? Look at number 5. I have the Gemara on the sheet. Number 5. Sorry, it's not in order. Just to keep you on your toes, throw you off a little. Number 5. Before Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi passes away, he tells his kids, Hizaru b'kvoid imchem, take care for the honor of your mother. So the Gemara asks, isn't that a biblical command? As if Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi has to remind his kids what his last will and testament is, honor your mother. Don't they know that? It says, Kabed es avicha v'semech, you have to honor your father and mother. So says the Gemara, no, Eishes av havoy. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was talking to his kids not about their mother, about their stepmother. It was a wife of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, not the mother of the kids. Frek the Gemara, Eishes av nami doiraisehi. The stepmother is also biblical. The Tanya that says, you know where the S's come to add. Es avicha, when it says Es avicha, that refers to the S is adding Zu Eishes avicha, the wife of your father, if your father marries another woman. The Esimecha, the S is adding the husband of your mother. I will tell you, by the way, the Rambam, when the Rambam quotes this Gemara, he actually flips it around, which is actually very significant. The Rambam says we learn from Es Avicha, the Es Avicha includes your stepfather, not like our Gemara that says Es Avicha refers to your father's next wife. The Rambam says Es Avicha is including your stepfather, and Es Imecha, the S is including your stepmother. The Gemara has the drasha the other way around. Es Avicha, S is coming to add your father's wife, and Es Imecha, the S by Imecha is coming to add your mother's husband. And maybe we'll see soon why that's significant. But either way, the Gemara continues, Vav Yiseda, why does it say Kabed Es Avicha, the Es Imecha? Why the extra Vav? Who needs the Vav? L'Rabba is to add Achicha God, your older brother. And we saw, right, the Chidah says also the older sister, Shvus Yankov says Dafka brother, and then there was also debate, is it any older brother or Dafka the oldest? But upon him, these 5 things the Gemara lists clearly. Mama, Tata, stepfather, stepmother, oldest brother. But let's just finish the Gemara. The Gemara is asking a question here. The Gemara says we have a brisa, you have to honor your stepmother, it's biblical, it's deraisa. So why did Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi have to warn his kids before he passed, don't forget to honor your stepmother? Says the Gemara, Heni mili mechayim. Do you know when you have to honor your stepmother? If your father's alive. But avala achar misa, once the father passes, law, you don't have to honor your stepmother. And that's why Rebbe had to beg his kids, please, I'm asking you a personal favor to continue to honor your stepmother. That's what the Gemara says. So go back to number 1. That's what the Marik is referring to. He says the only thing we find in Shas is your mama, your tata, stepmother, stepfather, older brother. And then he says the only thing the Gemara adds as, midas chassidus, as a proper action is your stepmother even after the father passes away. Avo ben haben bechvoid hazaken, but in the enikol to honor the zayda, ze loy motzinu b'shumok, we don't find it anywhere, the Marik says. Ve'im kain, if so, ein loy loy mar yoysa kaddish ma'adam acher, then the enikol really, because kaddish has to do with the mitzvah of respect, you don't have to honor your zayda, so the enikol really has no rights to the kaddish for his zayda more than anybody else. He can't say, I deserve the omud because my zayda. He has no more of a shaycha saying kaddish to his zayda than anybody else. But says the Marik, that's up pi halacha el shenogu came. But the fact is, the custom is, listen, you're gonna cup water. It's a little congested. The only thing is that imagine if no one's saying kaddish for the zayda, the enikul is going to step in. That's a minhag, not up pi halacha.
But isn't it respect for the, let's say, your father, if you're saying for your
So
father's
the rule is, so again, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. The general rule is, like we saw in number 5, like this. You have to honor your mother, you have to honor your father. Whether they're alive, whether they've passed. That's a Gemara clearly in Masechta Kiddushin. Afilu la'achar moisam, even after they've passed, you have to honor them. When you quote them, you don't quote them by name. You say the mama, the tata, and you add nice titles. You have to treat them with respect even after their passing. However, that's only respect which is due to them directly. Thank you so much. But anything which is indirect, for example, your mother's husband, your father's second wife, why are you honoring the spouse? What shaykhs does it have to you? Because it's respectful to your living parent that you honor their spouse. That's indirect. Once it's indirect, then that ceases once your parent passes. What's negay your parents directly, like not saying their name, that's even la'achar misa. So that's the general rule.
What's the motive for
The klal, you can make a shliach. You can make a shliach. The Rambam speaks about a case if somebody's parent nebuch is completely unwell, let's say mentally, and the kid can't take care of him. The Rambam says, but you could leave, but get someone else to do it. There's an Indian of having someone take your place to honor your parents. That we definitely have precedent for. Back to the Marik. Here's the issue, though. We have a general rule in Torah: Ein eklich are considered children. Ein eklich are considered children. Right, and that's how it relates to this week's parasha. We're going to see how it relates to last week's parasha as well. Ein eklich are considered children. V'hadar minon, says the Marik, b'nei bonim harayim kabonim. So here's the thing: if an einakul is considered a child of the zayda, then you, the einakul, are the child of the zayda. Your zayda is your father, so you should have to honor it. Says the Marik, nah. That's talking about the mitzvah of having kids. Concerning that, it was written, like it's brought, it says here, B'chayris, it's a printing mistake, it's meant to be in Yavamas, not for anything else. Meaning like this, we know when it comes to having children, there is a biblical obligation to have kids. Beis Shammai says 2 boys. We learn out from Moshe, who had 2 boys and then separated from his wife. Beis Hillel says a boy and a girl. We learn from the Eibishter, who created Adam and Chava. The Gemara brings numerous opinions. One opinion was that according to Beis Hillel, you could just have 1 kid, whether it's a boy, whether it's a girl. But the halach is we follow Beis Hillel, 1 boy, 1 girl. What if the kids pass away? So weiter, the Gemara brings a debate between the Rav Huna, Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Huna says you're yaitza. Once you did the mitzvah, you're yaitza. You don't lose the mitzvah. Unfortunately, the halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that if the kids pass away, you lose the mitzvah. Rabbi Yochanan himself suffered this fate. Rabbi Yochanan had 10 sons, and they all died. Ironically, he's the one that dafka paskin, if your kids die, you lose the mitzvah of Prudavu.
Is he possibly it on himself? Being hard on himself?
Who knows what came first?
Right.
But he definitely paskin this way. It's just interesting. So we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan that if the kids pass away, you lose the mitzvah. But what if your kids left their own kids? What if you have a Einiklach?
It's gotta. Everyone dies.
So the Gemara says, if ultimately the whole family passes, is gone, it could be, you're in Gan Eden, you're busy in your palace in Gan Eden, you can get thrown out. It seems like you lose the mitzvah. It's a hard thing, but we pass like Rabbi Yochanan that if the kids pass on, you lose the mitzvah. But what if they have kids? If you have Einiklach, it's good enough. B'nei bonim harihem kabonim. The Gemara says these words clearly. Your Einiklach are like your kids. Now there happens to be a very important debate between the Rambam and Tosfos concerning that. Most of us are familiar with the Rambam's opinion. The Rambam says in order for the Einiklach to work, it has to follow the following pattern. You had to have had a boy and a girl, and maybe they both passed on, but you have to have two Einiklach, one a boy, one a girl.
Awesome. Wow.
And one has to come from your son, and one has to come from your daughter. The only leniency is it doesn't matter which one. It doesn't matter if your grandson comes from your son or your daughter. It doesn't matter if your granddaughter comes from your son or your daughter. But you need a grandson, you need a granddaughter, at least one of each, and you need one from each of your children. Tosfos and actually most Rishonim disagree with the Rambam and say no. You do need to have two grandchildren, and they do both need to come, one from your boy, one from your girl, but the two grandchildren could be the same gender. They could be two girls or two boys. It doesn't matter.
Each one has to have a kid.
And the explanation is like this. According to the Rambam understands your Einiklach are your kids, literally, that you're using your Einiklach to be yoytz to the mitzvah. So therefore you need to have one boy Einikl and one girl Einikl. According to Tosfos, the pshat to the Gemara is different. It's if your kid has a kid, then you're still yoytze with your kid. If your kid has a child and then your kid passes, it's as if your kid is still here because your kid has a remnant. So since you're being yoytze with your kids, Tosfos holds, I don't care if the Einiklach are both granddaughters. Since your son had a daughter and your daughter had a daughter, that's tantamount to both your son and daughter being here, because they both have a remnant. And therefore you're yoytze with your son and your daughter. That's how Tosfos learns. And it seems actually like most Rishonim learn that way. Although the Rambam's pshat would be simpler. The Rambam learns, B'nei bonim harihem kabonim, you're yoytze with your Einiklach. And therefore one has to be a boy, one has to be a girl. But Tosfos Grada learns differently. But either way, says the Ma'arik, that idea was only about having children, not about honor. You don't have to honor your Zayda. The proof to Kainu, the proof that it's right, Shaharei ben haben kosher lehei lezikna, and Einikl can testify against his Zayda, ledivrei mar baravashi kedisa perkesh nechlin and Baba Basra. There's an opinion that an Einikl could testify against his Zayda. I afal gav chosh leis hilchus kavose. I would not pass like mar baravashi. Mikol mokna, but nonetheless, he is a legitimate opinion who says that grandchild can testify against the Zayda. And Pshita shetzorchu leyashav habraisa, he has to deal with the brisa that we quote in Yevamos, that b'nei bonim harihem kabonim. What's Mar Baravashi going to do? He says an Einikl can testify against the Zayda, but he also agrees that when it comes to having children, an Einikl is like a child. So how can he hold this contradictory opinion? It must be Mar Baravashi would tell you, you're mixing apples and oranges. When it comes to having children, there's a rule in Einikl's like a child. But that's it. It's only said about the mitzvah of Prudavu. Nowhere else do we link an Einikl to a Zayda, and therefore he has the opinion that an Einikl can testify against a Zayda. Elavadai says the Ma'arik, Le'inyan Prudavu, Dafke Itzma was only said about having kids, Kedekasavti, like I said before. But otherwise, there is no Indian for an Einikl to honor a Zayda, and therefore the Einikl really has no rights to the Kaddish or to the Amud for the Zayda. Azoy Zak the Ma'arik. Look at number 2. This is from the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. Says the Shulchan Aruch, first of all, Chayiv Adam Lechabed Chomiv, you have to honor your Shver. You have to honor your Shver.
Really?
Yes, and your Shviger. The Bach holds Yeshve. The Shulchan Aruch just says
Deraisa or
B'chomiv.
Derabanan?
Rabbi Yosef Kaira says he only brings you have to honor Yeshver. The Bach Rabbi Yoel Sirkish writes it's also Yeshviger, and the Bach's son-in-law, the Taz, quotes his Shver that it applies to Yeshviger too. You got to honor Yeshviger.
Is he just honoring him by saying that?
He's honoring the Shver by saying you got to honor the Shviger.
Ben Nagash told his son-in-law, yeah, to honor a shver is only the Rabbanan. Remember the Rabbanan,
Right. Now it happens to be though that there are some who hold this deraisa. There are some. The Smag, we're going to see two opinions. Although Bench is right, many hold that the Shver and Shvig is only rabbinic, because the Gemara did look at number 5. This is the Gemara. Where would the Shver be from? You could say Es Avicha maybe adds your Shver, but the Gemara doesn't use that. The Gemara says Es Avicha refers to your father's next wife, or the Rambam has Es Avicha, your stepfather. No one uses Es Avicha to include the Shver. So L'cher wouldn't be biblical. But the Samag, Reb Moshe Mikutzi, the Rishon, and the Charedim, we're going to see in number 7, the Charedim lives in Tzfas in the times of the Arizal. Both of them hold that the Shver is biblical, and probably the Shviger too. We'll have to see why. It's based on a pasuk that David HaMelech said to Shaul, Avi re'ei gam re'ei, see my father. So since biblically we have a pasuk where David, who was the son-in-law of Shaul, calls him my father, so when the Torah says kabed es avicha, avicha itself includes your father-in-law. I don't need, according to the Charedim and the Smag, I don't need es to add your shver. I need es maybe to add your stepmother or but not your shver, because we see from David and Shaul that a shver is considered av. So when the Torah says kabed es avicha, it includes your father and your wife's father. It includes both.
Could he have been
So
honoring
there-
him because he was a king, maybe?
What?
Could he have been giving
Yeah,
him
it could also be that, stam honor, right. It was, Anyhow, comes the Ramah. V'yeshoim, number 2, some say, says the Ramah, Ein Adam Chayiv, you're not Chayiv b'chvoid Aviyav. If some hold, you don't have to honor your Zayda. The Marik. Says the Ramah, the Einoi Niruli, I don't think that's true. Ella, says the Ramah, you have to honor your Zayda. But Chayiv b'chvoid Aviv Yoser. But you're Chayiv in the honor of your father more. Michvoid Aviyav, more than your Zayda. Says the Ramah, you have to honor your Zayda. It's just you're Chayiv to honor your father more. Where does he get it from? A medrash in last week's parsha. When Yaakov was traveling to Mitzrayim, Yaakov went to Be'er Sheva and he brought karbonos to the God of his father Yitzchak. Rashi on the spot quotes from the Medrash Rabbah, which says what the Eibush is not the God of Avram. Of course he is. But you have to honor your father more than your Zayda. So Yaakov hinged the karbonos on the Eibush, who's the God of his Tata Yitzchak. He didn't mention Avram because you have to honor your father more than your Zayda. Says the Ramah, what's mashma from there? If we say you have to honor your father more than your Zayda, it's mashma you have to honor your Zayda. Right. He's got to honor your father more. So the Ramah disagrees with the Madik. So far we have a debate. You have to honor your Zayda. According to the Madik, no. According to the Ramah, yeah. Let's see number 3 and number 4. These are two Gemaras which will seem to l'chayra prove the Marik is right. We're going to go on a bit of a journey here, not so long, for a couple of minutes. But you'll see where we're going with this. So number 3, there's a Gemara in the end of Masechta Saita. Rav Acha bar Yankiv, there was an Amir of Acha, the son of Yankiv. Itfal Bey, he was taking care of Yaakov bar Brate, the son of his daughter. In other words, Rav Yankov, this kid was an orphan. It seems like both his parents passed, and he was brought up by his mother's father. Ki Gadol, when the Enikol became bar mitzvah, he was older. Amarle, the Zayda said, Ashki on Maya, could you give me a drink of water? Amarle, Lav Brichano, he said, no, I'm not your son. The Enikol says, no, no, I'm not your son, I'm just your Enikol. And the Gemara says, V'hainu da'amri inshi, this is what people say, Ravi, raise me, but bar brotachana, but I'm really just the son of your daughter, don't ask me for any favors. Fascinating story. That's the story. So what do you see from here? Very clearly that the Enikol doesn't have to honor the Zayda. The Chayr is a simple proof to the Marik. The Chayra. Look at number 4, another Gemara. The Gemara in Masechta Makos Daf Yud Beis quotes a stira of 2 brises. Tani Chada, we learned in one brise, Av Shehorag, if a father killed his son, Benoi, another one of the sons, Nasa Loi Goyel Hadam, can become an avenger of the blood. We know that if Reuven accidentally, by mistake, kills Shimon, Reuven must run to the Ir Miklat, and if he isn't there, Shimon's relatives have the right to avenge the blood of Shimon by killing Reuven. So imagine you have a father who has 2 kids. He kills one of his kids. By mistake. Yeah. If it's mamash an accident, he doesn't have to go to the Ir Miklat. It's only if it's b'shoigig, which is translated as a mistake, meaning there was a certain level of negligence. Right. If it was an oinus or even karav loinus, he doesn't have to go. But there was a certain level of negligence, and the father killed one of the kids. And the father, he's not going to the Ir Miklat. So says the Brisa, one of the other sons has the right to kill the father to avenge the blood. That's a frightening Brisa. But says the Gemara V'Tanya Idach, there's another Brisa that says no. Ein Bunai Nasa Loi Goyel Adam. The son cannot avenge the blood by killing the father. So you have a contradiction. Says this. So the Gemara answers, Elo Loi Kasha. Says the Gemara, no, it's not a Kasha. You have to understand what we're talking about. It's 2 different scenarios. Ha B'Bnoi, Ha B'Ben B'Noi. One is about the kid, one's about the Einukul. Meaning,
Is the ankle the person?
mean like this. Yankul, no, hold on. Yankul is the Zaydah. Yankul has a son Beryl. He has a son Shemerel. If Yankul by mistake kills Beryl, Beryl's brother Shemerel has no right to kill his father to avenge the blood of his brother. Can't kill your father. But if Yankul killed Beryl, and Beryl has a son Yom Tov can kill the Zaydah. The Einikul can kill the Zaydah to avenge the blood of the father, not the uncle of the father. Comes Rashi, you'll never believe this. Look at Rashi, I have it on the side here. Says Rashi, Loi Kasha, don't make a contradiction. One Bryce is about the kid, one's about the Einikul. Ha the Tanya, the Bryce that says the son becomes a Goyel Adam. I'm sorry, that it doesn't become, is talking about when Yankul killed his son Beryl, and the person who's coming, the guy that wants blood is Beryl's brother Shemerel. So Shemerel wants to kill his father. That you can't do. But the other Brisa that says the son can, it doesn't mean the son of the murderer. It's the Einikul of the murderer. It's the son of the victim, the son of the one that was killed. And Rashi finishes, the Einoi Muzar al Kvaydoi, because the Einikul is not instructed, is not commanded to honor the Zaydah, and therefore is allowed to kill the Zaydah to avenge his father. So these 2 Gemaras seem to say black and white that you don't have to honor your Zaydah. It's 2 Mefudisha Gemaras. What does the Ramah have backing him? The Ramah number 2, he found the Medrash in last week's Parsha. And it's funny, the Medrash says, why did Yaakov bring Karbonos for the God of Yitzchak? It doesn't mention Avram. So the Medrash should have answered, well, maybe you don't have to honor your Zaydah. Now the Medrash says, although you have to honor your Zaydah, but your father more. That's the only source we have to the idea of following the Zaydah, of honoring the Zaydah. B'chal, no proof. The Medrash just said it, despite the fact you have to honor your Zaydah, Yankov ignored Avram because you have to honor your father more. Right. But you have Gemaras that seem to say black and white, you don't have to honor your Zaydah. So look on the next page, in number 6.
The animals are placed in the wrong place.
No, Ben Benoy Shel Ritzayach, the Einukul is going to, of the Zaydah who killed, and the Einukul is not Muzar al Kvaydoi of the Zaydah.
No, but he's saying after the case of the Bnei Shor.
No, Ben Benoy Shel Ritzayach. Ben Benoy Shel Ritzayach. Ben Benoy. Look at number 6. We come to the B'Shloim, you'll see where we're going with all this, it's going to be quite interesting, I hope. In number 6, we come to the B'Shloim Eiger. The B'Shloim Eiger is the son of the great Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Reb Shlomo Eiger marries a girl from Warsaw, and originally he went into business. He was successful, but then something happened, some story, don't know the exact details. He lost all his money. There was some libel against his shver, and he had to enter the rabbinate, and he became a rav. He was obviously a brilliant Talmid Chacham, and he was a fierce misnagid too. He was a fierce Mustang. In fact, when his son Shlomo Eger had a son Label, and we had a whole shir about him by now already 2 months ago, so we could repeat it all already. Label Eger, he ultimately became a chassid. He went to Kotsk, and his father Shlomo Eger sat shiva. His father Shlomo sat shiva for his son. Even the Masnagdim tell over the story. They say with Shlomo Eger tore Kriya, Gedis and Kriya, or at least he sat shiva for his son. Either way, Shlomo Eger was a huge Talmud Chacham, and he wrote notes on the Shulchan Aruch called Gilyon Maharsha, notes of the Maharsha. Not the famous Maharsha on the back of the Gemara, but he has the same in Rosh Tevis, Moreinu Rav Shlomo Eger. He tainas. The Ramah wants to know, how did the Marik forget a Medrash? It's not just the Ramah. If you look in the Taz is one of the main Mefarshim on Shulchan Aruch.
The Medrash or 2 Gemaras?
No, Fakir, the Marik has 2 Gemaras backing him. He's backing him. The Ramah says, you got to honor your Zayd. It's a Medrash Rabbin Vayigash. So the Taz says, it's Taka Pella, how could the Marik have forgotten a, not so much that it's a Medrash, but Rashi quotes the Medrash in last week's Parsha. Rashi quotes in last week's Parsha, you have to honor your Zayda, but your father more. How did the Marik forget about a Rashi? How did the Marik forget about it? So look at number 6. The Shlomo Eger is quoting the words of the Taz. V'teim al deya rishon Taz. I don't get the first opinion, which is the Marik. Denela mimeno pirush Rashi b'chumash. How did the Marik forget about a Rashi in Chumash? So says Shlomo Eger, Lufian is died. You know what I say about this? Zeu bichlal ein lemeidim. You can't paskin from Medrash. Kivan de lehepich is a Rashi b'halachas. You're quoting me a Rashi in Chumash. You know what Rashi writes in the legal section of Torah, in Halacha, in Gemara. Look at Rashi in Makkos Daf Yud Beis. We just saw this. Du mishum hachi ben nasa goyel adam l'skena. The ene can kill the zayde. Mishum the ene chayav al kvoy, doesn't have to honor him. And says Rav Shlomo, v'i after don't tell me the chayav l'chabda ksasak upon him. You have to honor your zayda abyssal. Because eiche goyel adam, how could you kill him? If you had to honor him in any shape, way, or form, you wouldn't have the right to kill him. So says Shlomo Eger, that's why the Gemara seemed to indicate black and white, you don't have to honor your Zayda. That's the Marik. The Ramah found a random Medrash? No.
Yeah, but in that case, the Rav Shlomo Eger is not taking into consideration that over there, the reason why is you're allowed to kill seemingly the grandfathers because you're honoring your father more. You're avenging your father's blood, so it's not a stira, it's not a shlach.
Right, but if you look in Rashi number 4, Rashi says the reason is you don't have to honor your Zayda. Look at number 4, the last 4 words of number 4 in the Rashi, the last 4 words. You're not. Rashi should have said, that we're doicha the covered of the Zayda because your father's blood is at hand. Right. But it makes sense to say that when the Goyal Adam kills the murderer, it's to avenge the blood and respect the blood of the one that was killed. So we could have Taka said you have to honor your Zayda, but since you have to honor your father more, like that Amos said, therefore you have the right to kill the Zayda to avenge your father's blood. But that isn't what Rashi says. To say that's what Rashi means and stick it into those words would be very hard. It doesn't really fit into Rashi's words. Fine. So where are we holding now? Fine, you have a debate, the Marik and the Ramah. The Marik has 2 Gemaras, seemingly. The Ramah has a Medrash. But here's where it gets... there's a tshuva of Rabbi Kiva Eger. It was supposed to be on the paper. It missed it somehow. It's still sitting in the other room. It's on one of the tables there. Rabbi Kiva Eger quotes from a sefer, the Livyas Chen. The Livyas Chen is a couple hundred years ago. What it is it's a commentary on Chumash. It's halachas. It's a nigla sefer that follows the parshas of the week. Hundreds of years ago, that was very rare. Today, people are putting out such svarim every day. Back in the day, it was rare to have a nigla sefer that follows the parshas of the week. The Livyas Chen was one such sefer. And in the Livyas Chen, he raises the following, and this is interesting. There's a Gemara in Kiddushin. If your father asks you for a cup of water, and your mother asks you for a cup of water, Al Pi Torah, the Torah says you have to honor both. Who comes first? So the Gemara says you give your father first. Why? Not because your father's honor is more important, but because your mother also has to respect your father. What that means is both parents have to respect each other. The Gemara in Yevamah says that a yid oyeva kagufa, you love your wife like yourself and you respect her more than yourself. But the respect the husband has for his wife is not in matters of food. The husband doesn't have to cook for the wife. The wife, the whole Mishnah in Ksuvas, the wife is supposed to cook for. The way the wife respects the husband is by filling up his stomach. The way the husband respects the wife, getting her clothes, taking care of her, companionship, etc. Therefore, if your father and mother both ask for a cup of water, the reason you give your father is because you have to honor both your father and your mother. We tilt the scale by saying, well, your mother also has to honor your father with food and drink, and therefore your father comes first. You and your mother have to honor your father. We find a similar logic in Masechta Yevamos in the beginning. If your father tells you, let's say, Yechves on Shabbos, I need a hot tea. So you have a mitzvah to make your father a hot tea. But the Eibishter says you can't heat up water on Shabbos. So who do you listen to? The Eibishter, your father. So the Gemara says, well, you have to listen to both, but your father also has to listen to God. It's a similar svara. You have two addresses to listen to. We're going to tilt it by saying you and your father, Hakol Chayovim B'chvod. You all have to honor God. So comes the Liv Yischain, and Rabbi Akiva Eiger quotes this, it seems like he likes the svara. Says the Liv Yischain, the Ramah's psak in number 2 is self-contradictory. The Ramah says you have to honor your Zayda, but your father more. Which is mashma. If your father and your Zayda both ask for a cup of water, the Ramah would say you got to get them both water, but your father comes first. Says Liv Yischain, what are you talking about? If you have to honor both, then we should say, you have to honor your father, you have to honor your Zayda, but your father has to honor your Zayda. We should tilt it that way. We should say the exact same thing. The Tata Villa Glas Vasa, your father wants water, your Zayda wants water, so you have to honor both. Well, your father also has to honor your Zayda. And therefore, the Liv Yischain Paskins, your Zayda comes first. Your Zayda comes first. Because of this logic that we have in Shas, by the father, the Zayda comes first. But he says a big chap. He says, listen, this is where you have the it's only while your father's alive.
Right.
If your father's alive, your father's chayiv in mitzvahs.
Right.
So then we'll tilt this. So it's amazing. He says like this: if your father's alive and the Zayda has passed away, your Zayda's honor comes first. Because you and your father have to honor your Zayda. So for example, if someone's Zayda passed away, and your father doesn't want to say Kaddish, he doesn't want, you want to. But your father says, I don't want you saying Kaddish. I don't want you. You would say Kaddish. Because you have to honor your father plus your Zayda, and your father has to honor your Zayda. But if the father passes away, says the Liv Yischain, your father's potter for mitzvahs. If your father passes away, he's potter for mitzvahs. So now it's just you to your father and you to your Zayda. Well, you to your father obviously comes first. So it's a fact. He says like this, mamash unbelievable. He says, if the Zayda's alive and the father passed away, who do you owe your honor to more? Your father. Even though he passed away. Because it's your father. Your Zayda's your Zayda, but your father's your father. And your father doesn't have to honor your Zayda because your father has passed on. It's potter for mitzvahs. But if the father's alive, then your Zayda comes first, even if your Zayda has already passed away. It's the strangest psak. You would never expect such a thing. And I'll tell you, part of the reason why it's so strange is because there's a psak of the Noida B'Yehuda. The Noida B'Yehuda has a well-known psak. B'chlal, if someone's parents are divorced and they both want water, what's the halacha? You give to either one you want. You can choose. You only tip the scale if your parents are married. Then we tip the scale by saying your mother has to honor your father. Right. If they're divorced, they're equal. The shah said, then what if one of them passes away? The chayra passing away is like divorce. Now both your parents are equal. So the shilas come up very often. If one parent gave it savo and then passed away, but the other parent doesn't want you to do it. So who do you listen to? Now that the parents are no longer married, they should be even Steven, they should be equal. One parent wants you to do it, the other one, but they passed away. The one that's alive says don't do it. So the Noida B'Yehuda Paskins, you should know a general rule.
Tapping down
if someone's
something
alive, what?
there. Something there.
Yeah. If someone's alive, they always come before someone that passed away.
It's the opposite.
The covet of life is always more important than the covet of someone who passed away. So the Noidi the Paskins, if somebody's father gave a last will and testament, and then he passed away. Hold on. Let me just finish. What?
Someone theoretically, according to you, consider the rebels a share. Same thing with the father.
What? How did you reach that conclusion?
What color is
No.
the
The Noidi Yehuda is saying like this: if somebody's father gave it savo, and the father passes on, and the mother's here and the mother zokt nein, you don't do it. You don't do it. Both parents are equal. Yeah, but whoever's alive has the upper hand. The covet to someone who's alive is more important than someone who passed away.
You still have to go with the other one.
Yeah, zicher, you have to honor someone that passed away. But if it's a contest and a conflict of interest, the one that's alive gets the upper hand. So it comes. The Livius Chain's psak is so revolutionary. The Livius Chain says between your father and your zayda, he says if your father's alive and the zayda passed away, your zayda comes first because you have to honor your zayda and your father has to. So the one that passed, if your father passed away and your Zayd is alive, your father comes first. Because since your father's potter for mitzvahs, it's just you to your father, you to your Zayd, you to your father comes first. Which is a fascinating thing. It's anyhow, but this is the psak.
If father writes a savo, the mother says don't keep it, you listen to your mother?
And the father passed away.
Yeah.
So it might depend on the nature of the tzavah. But generally, the Rebbe Yehuda generally gives a rule that, he says clearly about that very case, that the covet of the chaim, either way, whoever's alive comes first. Azoi, that's obviously for Ma'aseh B'Pel would depend on what the tzavah is, but this is a general rule the Rebbe Yehuda says.
How much money we're talking about?
Something together.
That what?
Father said he should come Rebbe. The
Father
mother
said
no,
what?
he shouldn't.
What do you say?
Yeah.
Father
The
said-
shaila is if a father says become the shaila is a parent can't tell you where to learn Torah. The shaila of a parent can tell not. You see, if the father gave it savor, there's also mitzvah lekayim divrei ames. If the mother tells you not to do it, not on every part of your life does your mother have a say. You know, the mitzvah of kibud aim doesn't apply. So it really depends on the nature of what the tzavah was. But the Noida says bikaron in general, the covet of the one that's alive trumps over the one that passed away. Anyhow, but here's the thing. So far we have the Ma'arik says you never have to honor your Zayda, never. And he has two Gemaras backing him. The Ramah says you always honor your Zayda, but your father comes first. Comes Rabbi Kiva Egi with the Livius Chain and says no. He says no. If you have to honor your Zayda like the Ramah, then the tables are going to turn. If your father and your Zayda both want a cup of water, your Zayda is going to come first. Because you have to honor your father and your Zayda. But your father has to honor your Zayda, and we said we have that svar documented numerous times in Shas. We always tilted if you have to honor both addresses. You have to honor A and B, but A themselves have to honor B. That always tilts the scale.
But the Gemara
So-
doesn't support it.
What?
This Gemara and
Uh,
say-
Rabbi, that's not Shulchan Aruch.
What? The mother and the father?
No, Zayd was a Zayd.
Well, what we saw. Rabbi Yosef Kaira quotes nothing about the Zayda. We have number two that I'm more. Anyhow, so here's the thing. Hold on.
I say that you give the grandfather.
That you have to give the grandfather first.
Yeah.
I left it. It's not on the paper. It's Rabbi Kiva Eger
But
and
it's against this
Tshuva quotes from the Livius Chain. Well, Bechlal the Ramah is against.
No, this one, the girl, Adam, like you said, it answers.
Oh, against number
Because
three.
he's dead.
Against number three. Okay. So we're gonna see.
But
Oh,
the other Gemara-
wait. Okay, good.
And Rashi,
The other Gemara stands on. Gemara and Sotach.
that says
Right.
much.
The
That says
Bechlal
you
didn't
don't-
want to give his
Yeah, I don't
Zayda a
think-
couple.
yeah.
Okay, we're gonna hello.
See, just by
If
Zayda.
number three was going to destroy the whole shir, you could be sure I wouldn't have quoted it. We're going to find a way out
That's
of
a
number
rebellious
three.
child.
Hold on, exactly. Hold on. So here's the thing. The Livius Chain's pshat seems to be a little, off the beaten track, but he does have a good argument. Don't we have precedent in Gemara? If your mama and tata both want a cup of water, we always say, well, since your mother has to honor your father, that tilts the scale. So when it comes to your father and your Zayda, the moment the Ramah says you have to honor your Zayda, how could the Ramah say your father comes first? We should apply the same logic. You have to honor your father and your Zayda, but your father has to honor your Zayda. That's your tilted. In fact, this kash is so strong that there are numerous big poskim who ask this on the Ramah. Rabbi Yankiv Emden in the She'ilas Yaivitz, he says, I don't get the psak of the Ramah. The Ramah's psak is self-contradictory. How could the Ramah say you have to honor your Zayda, but your father more? It doesn't make sense. The moment you have to honor your Zayda, there's a new logic which sets in, which is, whoa, you have to honor your father and your Zayda? Well, since your father has to honor your Zayda, that tilts the scale.
Of aim are real time.
Okay. Please, don't steal the shir. But okay, we're going to see in a moment. So, Rabbi Yankiv Emden therefore has a big problem with this psak of the Ramah. He's not the only one. The Tshuva Me'ava. The Tshuva Me'ava of Belazar Fleckels, who was one of the greatest students of the Noida B'Yehuda. He's about the Alter Rebbe's age. He's living in Prague. They never met. The Alter Rebbe's in East Belarus, and this fellow is in Prague. But Belazar Fleckels was a grosser Rav and a big Lamdan. And also, he was a misnagid. No, there's no question. He was an anti-Kabbalah to some degree.
So it was anti-moral?
No. He wasn't. He was anti-Bechal people learning Kabbalah. He fought Shabsai Tzvi like there's no tomorrow. In fact, the whole story with Jacob Frank, who claimed that he was a Gilgul of Shabsai Tzvi. Well, Jacob Frank had a daughter. And this daughter claimed she was also the Mashiach, one of the only false women Mashiachs. And she had a large following in Prague. Balabatim in Prague were supporting this woman.
Wow.
And Fleckels was so vehemently against, he was thrown in prison because of it. He ended up spending some jail time. He was mad against anyone that had any connection to Shabsai Tzvi. In fact, his Rebbe, the Noida B'Yehuda, was also a shtickle misnagid, but he was, although the Rebbe once by Fabrengen said it's well known, the Noida B'Yehuda wasn't a misnagid, and I have a whole explanation what that may mean. But the Noida B'Yehuda's wife was a relative of the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov would stay in their house in his younger years. Although the Baal Shem Tov was older than the Noida B'Yehuda, but he would stay in their home. And the Noida B'Yehuda didn't hold of the Baal Shem Tov's, but he respected him and he would pour him tea. And the Baal Shem Tov said, I can't have such a Talmud Chacham spending his time, heating me up hot water. So he stopped staying by the house. That was the official reason. It could be he didn't like the animosity over there either. Anyhow, but the Noida B'Yehuda has a number of tshuvas where he speaks about the issue of Chassidim, but he's very careful with his language. And he writes clearly, I have much to say, but I'm not going to say it. Right. But his student, Rebbe Elazar Fleckels, spares no, he doesn't hold back. And he writes, he writes that my Rebbe, the Noida B'Yehuda, every Sukkot would allow the whole Olam to come by and shake the Lulav and Esrog. One time a person came, he takes a Lulav and Esrog, and he starts mumbling. You know what he was mumbling? L'shem Yichud. L'shem Yichud. He says, my Rebbe, the Noida B'Yehuda, says, what? You're saying L'shem Yichud? He grabs the lulav and esrog from him and he came out, threw the guy out of shul. And the Tshuva Ma'ava, he says the whole L'shem Yichud comes from Shabsai Tzvi and what the Chassidim are, basically taking on minhagim of Shabsai Tzvi.
He didn't hold that.
He had Zoyar. The Tshuva Ma'ava says Zoyar. He doesn't buy the Zoyar. He says he writes. He says I have nothing against Rashbi. I just don't. He said Rashbi never wrote his name on the Zoyar. He says I follow Rabbi Yankiv Emden, who says that the Zoyar is at least much of it, a huge amount is not from Rashbi. It could be Moshe de Leon, the Rishon, who discovered the Zoyar.
I made it all up.
To a large extent. Now, I want to tell you that. Wait. Rabbi Yankiv Emden does write this. It's a fact. However, Rabbi Yankiv Emden in his other Sfarim does quote the Zohar. So the Chidah famously gave a pshat. The Chidah says, I didn't get it. The Arizal says that Zohar is from Rashbi. The Moshe Cordovera, the Ramak says Zohar is from Rashbi. How does Yankiv Emden have the gall to argue with these greatest Kabbalists? I mean, what was he thinking? So the Chidah says, I think Yankiv Emden only wrote what he wrote to undermine the followers of Shabsai Tzvi. Shabsai Tzvi and his mates, Nosson HaZossi, they blamed lots of their teachings on the Zohar. and the followers of Shabsai Tzvi, they were always quoting the Zohar to debunk, even to debunk halacha. So Yankov Emden, due to his fierce battle against the Shabsai Tzviniks, he went so far to say, the Zohar is Bechlal, you can't trust a word from the Zohar. But says the Chidor, it's not that Yankov Emden himself believed it. He went so far just because that was the only argument that he could, to dismantle the followers of Shabsai Tzvi. What's funny is that the Tshuva Ma'aver, Belazar Fleckels, he says, no, Rabbi Yankov Emden questions the Zohar, and so do I. And in fact, in his area, there was a one.
Was he also fighting Shabsai Tzvi? Or
Yeah. He was. No. Well, he's 100 years later.
So
but
still
there was
powerful?
because Jacob Frank, who said it was a Gilgal
Frank
Shabsai Tzvi, their daughter. There were still followers. The fight was still it's still going on. There's still you go to Turkey now. There's still Shabsai Tzvi hanging around over there. Yeah.
But they're not
They have a
infecting.
They're the real Jews. They say they have lots of Yiddish and Hagim. You could.
But they're not infecting them.
Yadim probably something to do with them. And Al Kapanim like this. So by the way, in his area, the government, the king, got involved in not allowing Sfarim of Kabbalah to be printed because it was wreaking havoc. And he writes in a tshuva, thank God to these Goyish leaders who are not allowing the Sfarim of Kabbalah to be printed. Like a real misnag. Anyhow, but the tshuva Ma'ava, he was a great Gaon. And he and Rabbi Yankov Emden, the two of them, they gang up against the Ramah. And they say the Ramah's psak is not tenable, it doesn't make sense. If you have to honor your Zaydah, then your father can't come first. The moment you have to honor your Zaydah, there's a new logic which falls into play, which is you have to honor your both. You have to honor your Tata and your Zaydah. Well, then we're going to say that since your father has to honor your Zaydah, that tilts the scale. And therefore they have a big problem with the psak of the Ramah. So what we want to do is to defend the Ramah from this kasha that the Liv Yischenes, Rabbi Kiva Eger, the Tshuva Ma'ava, Rabbi Yankov Emden. So we're going to give two answers. Number one is, let's assume you have to honor your Zaydah, right? Not like the Marik. Let's assume you have to honor your Zaydah, like the Medrash says in last week's Parsha. What's the reason you have to honor your Zaydah? Is the reason because your Zaydah is considered your father, to some degree? Or is the pshat that you have to honor your father? Imagine how disrespectful it will be to your father if you belittle his father. Imagine.
Second one.
So it's a major debate. The second way is from Reb Shlomo Kluger, the great Reb Shlomo Kluger, the times of the Tzemach Tzedek, the big Shlomo, the sharp one. He writes in one of his Sforim, the Tuv Tam V'das, you know why you have to honor your Zayd and your Baba? It's because it's negay your parents. How would your parents? It's so disrespectful to your parents if their kids don't respect their parents. That's what Reb Shlomo Kluger says. Now we have a similar shaila, by the way, concerning the older brother. The Gemara says in Ksuvos you have to honor your older brother, oldest brother, maybe older sister, fine. But what's the reason? Is it because it's negay your parents that the older sibling receives respect? Or no, God created a link between the younger siblings and the older sibling. So if you look in number 10, it's actually a debate between the Rambam and the Ramban. This is the Pischei Tshuva. He quotes from the Knesset Yechezkel. Rabbi Yechezkel Katzenellenbogen, who was a Rav in Germany in the region known as Ehu. Ehu, the Aleph is Altona, the Hey is Hamburg, and the Vav is Wandsbek. 3 cities right next to each other. Rabbi Yechezkel Katzenellenbogen was the Rav there right before the Yonis and Eibeshitz. So you're talking early 1700s. And the Knesset Yechezkel says there's a big debate between the Rambam and the Ramban. What's the reason you have to honor the oldest brother? Is the reason because it's negay of the parents that the younger siblings respect the older, right? Nothing gives more pleasure to the parents than when the siblings get along. Part of that is when the younger siblings respect the oldest. Or it's nothing to do with the parents. The Eibishter wants, just like you have to honor your parents, you got to honor your older sibling. What's the difference? The nafka mina is after the parents pass on. If you're only honoring your older sibling because it matters to the parents, well, we saw in the number 5, the Gemara in Ksuvos, that just like if somebody's stepmother or step-parent, you have to honor them while your real parent is alive. After that, it stops. So too over here. after the parents pass on, you wouldn't have to honor your older sibling anymore. But if it's a direct link between you and your older sibling, it would go forever. So we have a machlekes Rambam and Ramban about the oldest brother, the oldest sister. So too when it comes to your Zayda, how does it work? So Shlomo Kluger learns the reason you have to honor your Zayd and your Baba, it's because it's negaya your parents. It's the way to respect your parents. So hold, Rabbi, let me just finish my thought. I'll take. So please, I'm sorry, Rabbi Teitelbaum. Accordingly, many Rosh Yeshivas, many Achronim want to say, if you take the path of Shlomo Kluger, that Amaz Psak makes a lot of sense. If the only reason you have to honor your Zayda is because it's a way to respect your father, then you Bechlal have no link directly to your Zayda. So if your father and Zayda are both sitting at the table, and they both want a cup of water, it wouldn't make, well, Rabbi Kiva Eger, Rabbi Yankiv Emden, the Tshuva Ma'ava, they're going to say your Zayda comes first, because you have to honor both, and we'll tilt it because your father has to honor your Zayda. You Bechlal don't have to give your Zayda a cup of water. It's just that it's negaya your father. A way to respect your father is to listen, to show your father you care about his father. But it's only through your father. So if your father wants a cup of water, sure, that'll come first. You have no link to your Zayda.
Wouldn't your father
Even
want
that
your
theory
Zayda to
makes
get your
sense.
cup of water first?
Right, your
He
father
what?
wanted you to do that.
If he gives it, he tells you.
Right. No, but right now they both want.
Explicitly telling you not.
By saying
Who said they
Yeah.
both even know? They're in different religions. Said that they don't even know. They're not
Right,
fighting.
but
out.
theoretically, your
Text
father would
statement.
want your Zayda to get the cup first.
or not.
Right.
I think it goes.
Okay, so hello.
We have to take it to both ends.
You have 2 bowls of soup. You're walking. You're carrying both. Who do you give the soup to first?
Your father would want you to give your grandfather. According to that, even in that.
Your grandfather wants to give to your father.
Who's sitting at the head of the
First
table?
bowl, soup.
Who's sitting at the head?
That's a,
The first bowl, who do you
Zayda
give?
sits at the head of the table. Right?
Huh?
So what's the lamaisa?
Depends which house.
yeah. What if you father
That's
and
unbelievable.
grandfather?
If the parent or the Zayda doesn't keep Torah mitzvahs, that's a debate between the Rambam and the Tur. If they have to honor them, if they don't keep Torah mitzvahs. But I'll call upon him. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. That l'chor is a good answer, but that only works according to the Shlomo Kluger. The Charedim and the Vilna Gaon.
In Kveit Chomov. Also, because of.
Okay, right, yeah. That's a good point. So here's the thing, though. If you look in the Sefer Charedim and the Vilna Gaon, they learn differently. They say, you know why you have to honor your Zayda? Because your Zayd is your tata. Because B'nai Bonim Harihem Kabonim, the Zayd is your tata. Look at the Charedim number 7. Darshu Razal, the Gemara says in the end of Ksuvas, Esa Vichos, including your father's wife, Esimecho, your husband's, your mother's husband. And the Charedim says anything we learn out from Es is biblical. Then he quotes from Rabbeinu Yoina. Rabbeinu Yoina made up a new drasha. We don't know any source. Es Avicha is adding your father's brother, your uncle. And Esimecha is your mother's sister.
Yeah.
The shala is, does that mean Dafka your mother's sister without your mother's brother? That's Rabbeinu Yoina. But continues the Charedim. He quotes Rabbi Yisrael b'Sefer Meneiros Hamor, Da Avi Aviv B'chlal Aviv. Your Zayda is part of Aviv. When the Torah says honor your father, it means your Zayda. So to your father's mother. So to your mother's mother, your father's mother. And he quotes the Medrash Rabbah in last week's parsha that Yankov brought Zvachim to the God of Yitzchak, of his father Yitzchak. Why did Yankov mention Yitzchak, not Avram? Because you're chayiv to honor your father more than your Zayda. And Rashi quotes his Chumash Ramban, says the Charedim, both are biblical. Your Zayda is biblical. But your father is more than your Zayda. But so to your Baba. And he says, V'tayim D'chulu, you know why you have to honor both your Babas and your Zaydas? Because B'nai Bonim, Hariyim Kabonim. You are their child. So he clearly disagrees with the Ma'arik. He applies the logic for Kibbud, but he's disagreeing with Reb Shlomo Kluger. You honor your Baba and your Zayda because they're your mother and your father. And then he continues, so too a man is chayiv to honor your shver and your shviger. And he says the reason is because ish ve'ishta kechad gufa chashiv. A man and woman are one and the same.
Give your wife the soup.
Your wife's parents are your parents. It's a fascinating charedim. Va'av ve'eim shel zeh ka'av ve'eim shel zeh.
So the shtickle challah, you give your wife first?
Just
B'chal,
like
the
Rav
Gemara
Shlomo.
says first you got to give to
Make
the.
the bracha yourself.
No, I
Yes.
make
First to the
myself
behemoth
eat,
and-
and my mother and my wife are sitting there.
Who's next?
My father was makbid to give bread to the family before he ate himself. Even though in Shulchan Aruch it seems it might be a hefsek, the Gemara says in brachas you got to feed
all
your
part of the
livestock
same
before you
inyan?
feed yourself.
Yeah, but with
But it's
It's
washing.
not covered.
But that could be with the Gemara is not talking about
But do
it.
you give your wife before your mother?
I just had this.
Oh.
I'm sitting in
Oh,
this,
oh, oh.
so what's the answer?
Hold on, let me. And then he finishes. It's based on a medrash that David told Shaul his shver, "You're my father," and he quotes a pasuk in Micha that daughters go against their mothers, daughters-in-law against their shvigers. Says the Charedim, the fact that Torah, the pasuk in Micha puts them together, means a daughter-in-law has to honor the shviger the same way a daughter and the mother. So according to the Charedim, why do they have to honor your Zayda? Because it's your father. The Vilna Gaon says the same thing in number 8. It's his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. If you see, first he quotes the Gemara in Makkas that we saw as a support to the Ma'arik. You don't have to, because the Einikul can kill the Zayda. But then on number 8 of the Gra, on the second line, on the Ramah's words, Ve'einer Nirali, that the Ramah says, I think you have to honor your Zayda, says the Gra, look at Saita Daf Mem Tes, the raya we saw, it's a raya to the Ma'arik. But says the Gra like this, nah. Venirali, seems to me, says the Gra, you only have to honor your father's father, not your mother's father. De la'avi imay potter, to the father of your mother, your potter. Why? Because there's another medrash in last week's parsha. When we count the 70 souls going to Mitzrayim, we count Yankov's sons, his daughter Dinah, Yankov's grandsons, his son's sons, and his son's daughters. We count Serach and Yocheved. The Medrash Rabbah says, but there's more people. Dinah's kids. Why don't we count Yankov's Einiklach's, Dinah's kids? Dinah married Eve, according to one opinion. What about her kids?
Shaul ben Aknanis.
Shimon. That's because it's Shimon's kids. It's because it's Shimon's kids, not Al's Dinah. And the Medrash quotes Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi, who says, B'nai Bonim are like kids, not B'nai Bonos. Not B'nai Bonos. That's why she's not counted. Now, right?
not counted.
Because she's from Dinah. No, Osnas isn't counted. She's not part of the 70.
It says 66. Who's the extra 4?
Well, Yosef is 2 sons, and the Eibishter, Yaakov or Yocheved.
Or Asnas.
Who does someone count? You're counting Osnas. You're counting Osnas. Right?
I've never heard Asnas.
Fine. It's a svara. The problem is the Medrash Rabbah clearly says we don't count Dinah's kids. Because so says the Vilna Gaon, why do you have to honor your Zayda like the Charedim? Because B'nai Bonim are like kids, but that's only by a son's son, not by a daughter's son. The story in Saita was the daughter's son. So the daughter's son says, I'm the son of your daughter. I don't have to give you a cup of water. So according to the Vilna Gaon and the Charedim, why do they have to honor your Zayda? Because you're directly linked. Then our Shaila comes back. Rabbi Kiva Eger's Shaila, the Tshuva Me'ava, Rabbi Yankov Emden, if you do have a direct link to your Zayda, like the Charedim, the Vilna Gaon learn, so if your father and your Zayda both want water, your Zayda should come first, not like the Ramah, because we have a logic, you have to honor your father and your Zayda, but your father has to honor your Zayda, that should tilt it. So the answer to this is, it's actually not on the sheet. When it comes to honoring your parents, the Minchas Chinuch has a famous shaila, theological shaila. You know, if one of my friends asks for a cup of water, I don't have to give it to them. I can say, go get yourself, right? There's no chiyuv to be mechabed somebody else. You got me a cup of water, thank you. But you didn't have to. You didn't have to. But when it comes to your parents, the Eibishter made a new mitzvah. If you have to feed them, take care of them, is that between me and God? The Eibishter made a new mitzvah. Or is it an interpersonal mitzvah between me and my parents? If I don't get them the cup of water, do I need to ask them for forgiveness? Or ask the Eibishter for forgiveness? In other words, is honoring your parents a mitzvah bein Adam lechavera, between you and them, interpersonal? Or it's between me and the Eibishter, bein Adam lamakom. We know the Ramban says the way the Aseres HaDibros are divided, the first 5 are between man and God. Now, number 5 is honoring your parents. How is honoring your parents between you and God? So, the Ramban and the Sefer HaChinuch explain it's pashut. The Eibishter wants you to honor your parents because They made you. They gave you life. Well, through that, you'll come to understand, I better honor God. The Eibishter wants you to be grateful to those that have given you sustenance, and to engender in a person appreciation to the Eibishter as well. But comes the Chaye Adam. The Chaye Adam, Rabbi Avram Danziger, who was also a big misnagid, but he was a Rav in times of the Alter Rebbe. He was a student of the Vilna Gaon. And he was actually a businessman for many years, but then he became a Rav. He writes, Nebuch, these days, he says, these days, Balabatim, they only learn 3 hours a day. It's not like Hamol, he says. These days, they only learn 3 hours a day. Anyhow, the Chaye Adam says a fascinating thing. He says, you know why you have to honor your parents? He says, your parents created you. Your parents took care of you for years. They woke up every night, barely slept. How much money did they pour out for you? You owe your parents big cash. Every child owes their parents big time. Lots and lots of equivalent of money. But the Eibishter says, don't pay them in cash. Pay them in kavod, pay them in respect. Says the Chaye Adam, if you don't honor your parents, you're like a person that defaults on a loan, which it says in Tehillim, Loi v'rosha v'lo yishalem, the Rasha borrows and doesn't pay. He said, if you don't respect your parents, you're pasha Rasha, because you're ingrateful, they gave you so much, how can you not give back to them? Which means there's two elements of honoring your parents. One is you honor them as partners in creating you, and that will lead you to honor the Eibishter. It's Ben Adam Lamakim. But there is an element, says the Chaye Adam, Ben Adam Lachavera. You should owe them. He said it's a priyas chayv, it's like paying back Pashat money that you owe. So accordingly, many say this is the Pshat in the Ramah. When your father wants a cup of water, you have two reasons to give him the water. A, God said so. B, you owe it to him. To your Zayda, you don't have both reasons. Your Zayda, you have to honor, it's only Ben Adam Lamakim. Because he's a general shutuf in creating you, and through honoring him, you honor the Eibishter as well. It's only the first Inyan. But you don't have to pay him back for all the Chanukah geld he gave you. That was a gift he gave you. The priyas chayv doesn't apply. And therefore, it's like what you said in the beginning. When your father and mother both want a cup of water, so they're equal. So you tilt it by saying, well, your mother has to honor your father as well. But if your fathers, they both want a cup of water, the two chiyuvim are not on the same playing field. You owe your father twofold. It's not just a heavenly mitzvah. You should owe it to him. It's like you owe. It's like this is the cash. You have to pay him back. Your Zayda wants water, so that's between you and God. In other words, according to this mahalach, if someone doesn't honor the Zayda, you wouldn't have to ask him for mechila. It's between you and the Eibishter. It's between you and the Eibishter. And therefore, we're not going to tilt it by saying your father has to honor your Zayda.
In that case, the Gemara, that Zayda, though, brought him up, spent the money and did all the sweat labor.
Okay, fine. But you'd say the Eibishter made a general rule.
Give your mother
And
a challah first before your wife.
Stepfather.
From this also, no?
Stepfather.
Yeah?
If he raised you, right.
If he
Well,
raised
listen, the Eibishter made rules based on the general circumstances. Once the way Torah rules works is sometimes you'll find exceptions, but the exceptions are going to just be part of the general rule, even though the logic may or may not apply. In other words, very often the stepfather doesn't raise you; they only come into your life later on. So, says I'll just leave you with some food for thought. So that's a second answer. So the first answer was you go with Shlomo Kluger, you have no link to your Zayda. The second answer is you have a link, but it's a weaker link. But here's the thing.
Like Rashi.
Here's the thing. Yeah, exactly. So the Ramaz Psak makes more sense. You have to honor your Zayda, but your father more. Therefore, the two honors are not on the same playing field, and therefore we're not going to tilt it by saying, well, your father also has to honor your Zayda. But here's the thing. There was a shaila. Your wife's in the kitchen. She's making soup, right? At the table, you're sitting there, and her father is sitting at the table. Now, your wife has to honor you. It's part of the marriage deal. She also has to honor her father. Now, there is a general rule. While a woman is married, there's very little expected from her to honor her parents because she's busy. But if her father's in her house and he wants food and she has food in the kitchen, she definitely has to give him the food. It's not going to impair her relationship with her husband. But here's the thing. Her husband wants the food. Her father wants the food. She has to honor both. Her husband has to honor her father. It's the shver. We saw by David, the smag, the Chaim says is biblical. So according to the Tshuva Ma'ava, according to Rabbi Yankiv Emden, according to Rabbi Kiva Eger and the Livyas Chain, she should have to give it to her father. Because we should say, she has to honor you, plus her father. We should tip the scale by saying, well, you have to honor her father, it's your shver. So who does she give the soup to first? So according to this second approach we're giving, she would give to you. Because the shibud she has to you because of the ksuva is a monetary
How about the
document.
other way around?
She has to feed you. It's a monetary obligation. She has to, so the two chiyuvim are not on the same playing field. She has a monetary obligation to you.
So the other way around.
More than her
is
father.
option.
Here's the shaila though. But hold on, but according to the other shittas, according to the Yankiv Emden, if you probably have to give to your father first. Because we would say she has to honor the two of you, and we would tip the scale by saying, well, you have to honor her father. Let's say your wife's making soup in the kitchen. You're at the table with your father. So the same thing. Your wife has to honor you, and she has to honor your father because it's her shver. And you have to honor your father as well. So according to Rabbi Yankiv Emden and the Tshuva Ma'av and Rabbi Kiva Eger, the Cherbi would apply the same logic. She should have to give the soup first to your father. Because since she has to honor you and your father, we would tilt the scale by saying, well, you have to honor your father as well. But according to the approach we're saying now, you wouldn't. Because your wife's obligation to you is on a different playing field than her obligation to your father. To your father, is stam, you have to honor the shver. Even according to the Charedim, is biblical, because, your father's like her father, but she has a monetary obligation to you, the shibud of the marriage.
It's not about her respect specifically to her father-in-law. It's her respect to you, which is both.
No. But the Charedim said the reason you have to honor your shver is not because it matters to your spouse. It's because your spouse's parents are your parents. So even though it goes through your spouse, that's just... the relation goes through your spouse, but then the link is direct.
And then you, out of respect for your father, give it to your father.
Your father never asked you for the soup. You're not the waiter here. You don't have to give your soup to your father. Your father says hashkeni mayim. Your father never asked you for the soup. If your wife gives you the soup, why do you have to give it to your father? You never.
And the other way around.
But here's I'll leave you with this.
When you don't have these kind of.
What?
The other way around. When you're cutting the challah, your wife's by the table.
Also,
and
when
your
you're
mother's
cutting
by
the
the table.
challah, that's the you have your mother, and
Your wife. You schneid the challah, you ate the first piece.
we said the respect the husband has to his wife is not in relation with
no monetary.
machiloi.
There's no, you're not.
What does she do?
Right.
Your mother first.
The woman
Your
has to
mother.
give you.
You give your mother, but it's good for
Nothing.
your
She's
mother.
a housewife.
The only thing is, if you know your mother's going to feel uncomfortable, then the respect to her is to give to your
I
wife.
know,
but if you know that your mother wants, the bread and your mother's not going to be
matter which one
uncomfortable,
Let's say your mother's not going to matter, and your wife.
your
is
mother,
not
then
gonna-
your mother.
Wow.
Yeah. Unless she.
Back to Israel.
No, unless
I knew it. I felt
No, no, hold on, wait. Hold on, wait. Hold on.
Your mother wants.
If your shalom bias,
other way around.
wait. There's another factor. If you're going to destroy your shalom bias that
gonna
way,
destroy it. Have to
no, the
explain
Eibishter allows his name to be erased for
You
shalom
have to explain
bias.
it. What do you mean?
Now the Eibishter's name is more than honoring your parents.
Say, listen,
So for sure the Eibishter would say, throw away. Hey, but hold on. I'll say one more. This is one question which we have to
unless you're a
analyze.
bum and
And-
your money comes from the wife.
This is a case.
Put it like this. Put it like this, and whoever grabs.
This case I don't know the answer to. Imagine you have an older brother who's your Rosh Hashiva, and you learned by. And now you're home, right? So you have your Rosh Hashiva, and your older brother, he wants a cup of water. Your father wants a cup of water. So here's the deal. You have to honor your father, but you have to honor your Rebbe, your teacher. Now, your older brother, though, has to honor your father as well. So according to the Bekiva Eger, the Tshuva Ma'ava, it's a no-brainer. You give to your father. But here's the thing. Who do you honor more, your father or your teacher?
Teacher.
Your teacher.
Especially with
So,
your
so according to this explanation, you would give your brother first because his chiv is
This goes on
greater,
tiebreakers.
which is l'chayra. It's very hard to imagine
Why your brother?
in front of your brother's your Rosh Hashiva.
But your brother is your.
Yeah. The brother. So if your chiv to your brother is greater than to your father because he's your Rebbe, then we would say we're not going to tilt it by saying your father.
Haran moved away.
Right, from his son, right. But the Shah, imagine here your father, and it would be. I saw Reb Asher Weiss. Reb Asher Weiss, one of the big contemporary Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael. He has this question.
It's a good question. That's good.
I don't know. It's a hard one to imagine. According to our, here we'll say, since the chiyuvim are not equal, you'd give your brother first. It's very hard to imagine that you would, though, in front of your father. Which means, though, then that maybe unravels our whole shir. Then that means that even if the chiyuvim aren't equal, sometimes you have to tilt it.
Yeah, well then that would go like the chida. I mean, with the.
All those other opinions, but they threw the Ramah out the window. All right.